Mr. Travis Bennett, in his infinite wisdom, has queried us this. Lately, I've seen marketing for cable knit sweaters with clan-specific knitting patterns. Clan-specific knitting patterns. I'm wondering whether these are a new concept or if it has deep historical roots. When did this originate? So clan or family-specific knitting patterns for cable knit sweaters. We are primarily talking about Irish now. The Irish invention of the what's often called the Aran KNit sweater.
Indeed. Quite. Spoiler alert. It's marketing. Yeah. There is a current push for clan specific. This is the Murphy pattern, and the story that is spun is that these poor dead fishermen that washed up on shore, how they were identified was their clan sweaters. It's not true. There's historical evidence of a play.
There was a play.
Yep.
A play.
One play. Only one play.
In like the 19 teens or 20s.
Yes.
I can't remember the title right now.
Exactly. Not hundreds of years old, 100 years old, where a woman recognized that a sweater, one, that washed up had a couple, two, drop stitches, which she recognized as her own work, so that it was her husband who had washed up, and that is essentially it. And then that was extrapolated and said, well, that's how you identify all dead Irish fishermen who wash up on the shore, 27 times a day. Which, how that's not voted the most, dangerous job in the world ever, don't know.
It's pretty dangerous, but yeah.
Apparently. But no, it is marketing. Now, that said, if you like it, if it's fun, if it means something to you, great, buy it. If your name is Murphy and you come across the Murphy Irish clan pattern sweater and you're like, wow, that's a really cool looking sweater and it has my name on it, great, buy it. There is a tradition, a broader tradition in marketing in companies of naming products names. So we have bags in the store called an Emily bag, a Fiona bag. There are different, companies have to give a product a name so that they differentiate it within their stock. So if my name is Emily and I look like an Emily, I know. It's the beard. If I walk into a store and I see this tweed handbag and I look at the tag and I go, oh, Emily, my name is Emily and I happen to like that bag, great. I might add that little bit of meaning onto my purchase of the bag because it was meant to be because my name is Emily and the bag's name is Emily and I like the tweed. Great. Wonderful. Have at it. If it means something to you, wonderful. If your name is Murphy and you like the pattern in a Murphy Irish sweater, great. Buy it. No one is stopping you from buying it, but it's not a long entrenched historical thing. It is marketing that is fun, but it is not necessarily as meaningful as people want it to be. It does not have this story. We are here as stewards of truth as much as we can be, and we are going to tell you it's not a real thing. If it means something to you, great. Do it. Have fun with it. Don't not do it because it's a new thing, but it's a new thing.
Yep. Basically that. The odds of you walking down the street in your Murphy sweater and seeing somebody else who sees your sweater and says, oh, you're a fellow Murphy, I recognize your weave pattern, is slim to none. So yeah, there weren't two companies in Ireland who came up with this stuff specifically for appealing to the tourist market. The predecessor to this was the idea that certain knit patterns of Aran sweaters were rooted in spiritual symbols, biblical symbols. And that goes back to a book written by a guy who was a shopkeeper. And of course, I'm not remembering his name, or the title of the book was like the Divine Origins of Weaving or something like that. And knitting. He was, knitting. And he was looking at sweaters around town, and he thought that some of the knotwork designs reminded him of biblical stuff or spiritual stuff. So he started basically inventing it. He invented this whole lexicon for them, and he published it in a book. The book, of course, hit a romantic tone, hit a nerve, and so it sold. And to this day, people are convinced that basically Aran sweater patterns are related to these ancient Celtic Christian Catholic symbols, for good luck or faith in God or salvation or whatever. It's not true. I don't know whether the guy believed it sincerely or not, or if he did because he was going to sell the books in his shop. But that is mythic. The history of Aran sweaters is actually a lot shorter than most people think. They were invented purely out of practicality to keep guys from going hypothermic. Period. They're basically indestructible and probably the single most efficient warmth layer ever invented. But their invention doesn't go back more than like the 1880s or so. Believe it or not.
And it was also brought to the Aran Islands.
Yes.
It wasn't invented there.
It was part of a civic. It was
thing.
part of a concerted civic effort because the Aran Islands were undergoing horrible conditions. They needed all the help they could get to save the fishing industry.
Yeah.
So they brought in expert fishermen from other parts of the UK and the Orkneys to show these people other fishing techniques. And when those guys came over to teach them new fishing techniques and just to help them do the work, they brought their families with them. And so the wives of those fishermen said, here's how we make sweaters back home. Here's how we do this. And then the women in the island said, oh, that's great, but I could do this better. So they turned it into their own thing, but the roots of it actually came from other places.
Now, here's the question.
Sorry.
Would going back to the book now, or not analogy, but the book example, do you think that instead of it, obviously it didn't have religious and those kind of connotations right out of the box, that wasn't imbued in the origins of it, and it evolved into these things and kind of play with it again through marketing. But were there regional patterns potentially within it? In the same way that there's regional dyes or regional tartans within Highland.
I think people will try and tell you that. That's another way they market them. Like, oh, this is the pattern from X and X village.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some truth to that because when you're learning to knit, you're learning
from your friends who are local.
Well, from your family.
Yeah.
So the grain of truth is the fact that handcrafts are passed down from parent to daughter, parent to son, whatever. And so you have a familial tradition and by extension a community tradition of this is how we've always done it. I'm going to show you my favorite stitch. And so some of this stuff has become ingrained and because of that natural human function. And I mean, this is how culture develops. This is where culture comes from. And that is the grain of truth behind all this stuff we're talking about, is that basically, that you had familial traditions of how to make a thing. And for better or for worse, the symbology that the guy came up with in his book has lasted, and the names of the stitches is useful. So when they retain it, it's like, oh, if you want to refer to X stitch, like, oh, well, that's the lily stitch, or oh, that's a cross stitch. So it is handy for people to communicate about the art. So a practical element of it has been retained for practicality.
Yeah. There's always the way that I always try to look at history is through a lens of the KISS model. Keep it simple. What is the Occam razor? What's the simplest solution? What is the probable cause for how a certain thing evolved? It's probably true. And if there's a big, illustrious, beautiful, well-rounded story, it's probably marketing and somebody taking it and running with it. So there's less truth there, and you kind of have to dig through it and think about it critically and say, okay, well, did the person who developed this stitch really think that this meant that this was the symbol of the cross through Christianity and da-da-da-da? Or was it just, this is a pretty design that they liked, and it kind of came down through a particular family, and then which became a region, which became a thing in an area. So think about things critically and go through it through that lens. And then, I don't know.
And the other reason these meanings get heaped onto objects is when the object is no longer entirely practical for its purpose. It's been superseded by newer technology. People don't rely on it anymore. So there is the risk of it not being made anymore because it doesn't matter anymore on a practical materialist level. Therefore, if you can imbue the object with spiritual, cultural, emotional value, you are incentivizing people to preserve the art form. You see that in tartan. You see that in Japanese crafts. I'm a big fan of all the traditional Japanese stuff, like sword making and kosode making and stuff like that, ikat, all that stuff. If you make it, this is our thing and this is our legacy, then you're preserving the art form. So people very quickly will put emotional layers on top of something that's initially just practical because they don't want to see it go away.
And people need to find meaning in things.
Absolutely.
And there's an innate human desire to see deeper into it and imbue a thing with more meaning than it naturally has. Because it can't just be a pretty pattern. It must mean something. And it has to be a soul-searching thing that's within it. So, yeah.
And frankly, it just helps you remember better.
That's
it
fair
engages
too.
more parts of your brain.
Yeah.
So,
but that's how it evolves. And that's the fun part of it. Yeah. Okay. If there's anyone who loves a good marketing story, it's me. Trust me. Now, the point is, you have to understand where the marketing story came from, and you have to recognize it as just a story. So if you want to buy into something for an emotional connection to a product or to an idea or a concept, great, do so. But don't push it forward as fact. It all has to start somewhere. And whether you enjoy the marketing aspect of it or you just like it as a pattern, it really doesn't matter as long as you are being honest and truthful with yourself for the reasons that you're connecting with the product.